And we're back for another episode of Standpoint. I'm Gabe Groisman. We're going to try something new out here today for everybody. About once a week or so, whenever something big happens, I'm going to join you directly, just me, to talk about specifically a news story, what's happening, and then give you a little bit about my standpoint, my viewpoint, where I come from on this issue, why it's important, why it's something I think people should pay attention to. This week, we're going to kick off with the International Criminal Court, the ICC. Many of us have heard about the ICC and the fact that the International Criminal Court has asked for arrest warrants, or more specifically, the prosecutor has asked for arrest warrants to be issued against the heads of Hamas, Sinwar and his henchmen, but also of note, the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant. This is something we've seen in all the headlines. Most of the news headlines will say things like the world's top criminal court seek to arrest Bibi Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. It's not true. Actually, they're not seeking to arrest them yet, but the prosecutor is doing that. He's on a roadshow, doing press, trying to garner public support, or at least infamy for himself, seeking these arrest warrants against a sitting prime minister. The first thing I'll note is this is the first time the International Criminal Court has sought a arrest warrant for a democratically elected head of state, and it's something that's unheard of, and it bears more digging into. So just what is the ICC? Most people haven't heard of it. It's actually not such an old institution at all. The International Criminal Court was established in 2002. It was adopted with the Rome Statute in 1998 and came into effect in July 1st, 2002. The court's headquartered in The Hague, the Netherlands. The point of the court is supposedly to prosecute individuals for serious crimes like genocide, war crimes, and crime against humanity. Who are they supposed to prosecute? Member countries is the answer. The countries that can voluntarily become members of the International Criminal Court by joining the Rome Statute, and those countries also they're meant to prosecute individuals in countries where they don't have a valid court system, or a true court system where those court systems would or could prosecute individuals for those crimes. Again, the ICC, when you look at it, it sounds really nice. It came to be for the right reasons, apparently, to go after the worst offenders. Who's going to prosecute the Nazis? That's really the question that you would think about. After World War II, whose job is it to go after the Nazis, to hold them accountable? And that's why the ICC was established. There were several other tribunals before the ICC. The prosecutor is selected by the member nations in a pretty ambiguous manner. The prosecutor today is Karim Khan, a Pakistani British national. He's the guy who's made the decision to seek these arrest warrants. The arrest warrants are sought actually on a panel of 3 judges. The application is a private application, so no one's actually seen it. The only basis for the arrest warrants is what we know from the press. The allegations that we understand is supposedly attempted starvation as a strategy of war and genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza by Israel, both of which are factually nonsensical and easily disproven by all the data. Just very, very, very quickly on genocide, if you look at the numbers of deaths, of civilian deaths to combatant deaths, even using the quote-unquote Gaza Health Ministry's numbers, which is really just Hamas, the ratio of combatants to civilians, it's about 1.2, 1.3. So the worst one initially was 1.2 to 1 to 3. Now it's about 1.2 to 1. So almost a 1-to-1 ratio, which is unheard of in urban combat warfare history. Those are numbers and data that's been proven and spoken about by some of the world's biggest generals here at West Point in England, by Colonel Richard Kemp and many others. But that's irrelevant to the prosecutor Khan, who's just trying to be famous for going after the Prime Minister of Israel and the State of Israel, which seems to be very in vogue these days in certain circles. The second, which is the claim of starvation, is also ludicrous, given that the sheer numbers, easily objectively proven, is that more food is going into Gaza today than was before the war. There's the latest calculation is that there's enough food for about 3,200 calories per person in Gaza being taken in every single day into Gaza. The problem is Hamas is not distributing that food, and the video evidence is there. You can see it on the streets, Hamas shooting Palestinians who are trying to take the food. The food, you could see it in the food markets, in the shuks, in the markets in Gaza, being sold by people in Gaza. So they're not letting the food get to people in Gaza. That's Hamas's problem. It's their responsibility. The case factually is nonsensical, but also important to note is that the ICC does not have any jurisdiction over the state of Israel. It doesn't have jurisdiction for two reasons. One, like I said, the state of Israel is not a member country of the Rome Statute or of the ICC, so they don't have jurisdiction. So then the argument is that they have jurisdiction because the quote-unquote state of Palestine, which is non-existent, is a member of the ICC. And if they're a member of the ICC and the crime is committed in a member state's jurisdiction, then that's step one towards the ICC having jurisdiction. So first, that's fiction number one towards jurisdiction, that there is a state of Palestine. There isn't a state of Palestine. There's never been one. So that's the first falsity or fallacy that's a basis for the jurisdictional claim that the prosecutor Khan is making at the ICC. And the second one is that Israel doesn't have a judicial system that would prosecute war crimes. That's false. Israel has one of the most active Supreme Courts in the Western world. It's a court of first instance where anybody without standing can file claims. They don't even have to be Israeli citizens. They can file claims, and they do. If I'm not mistaken, the general of the Central Command of Israel, he has 9,000 cases filed against him every year in the Supreme Court. 9,000 cases filed against him. So there is an active, and by the way, very left-wing Supreme Court who is very aggressive and is actually prosecuting. The Attorney General's office is prosecuting Prime Minister Netanyahu for some nonsensical claims similar to the claims brought against Trump here in the United States that are not going anywhere, were brought for political purposes. But there's a very active, if not overactive, judiciary in Israel. Reason number two, that the ICC has no jurisdiction. But why does this matter for Americans? Well, you know, another country that's not a member of the ICC, and that's the United States of America. The U.S. initially signed the Rome Statute but never ratified it. They did not join the ICC. Just so you know, just quickly, other states that are not members, there's 124 countries, minimum, at least 124 countries are parties to the Rome Statute. Other countries that are not: China, India, Russia, Turkey, and Israel, of course. But what happened with the United States, and why is this relevant to the United States? People who follow politics closely, like many of you, might remember that in 2017, while Trump was still president, the ICC threatened to start an investigation against the U.S. military and intelligence officials for alleged war crimes in Afghanistan. And Trump did what Trump did and what Trump does and hopefully will do, which is to really raise the volume on the ICC. Trump issued an executive order in response imposing sanctions on the ICC officials, on prosecutors, on investigators. If you're going to investigate the United States, he sanctioned you. The president, through executive orders, issued these sanctions, travel bans, asset freezes, etc. And it worked. It scared him off the ledge. It said, you know, the prosecutor at the time said, okay, we're not going to do it. This is too much pressure. Because it turns out that weakness doesn't work on the world stage, and we're seeing that now under President Biden. They backed off. The prosecutor resigned. A new prosecutor came up, and the prosecutor's name was Khan, who's the prosecutor there today. Now here we are again, and they're going after a U.S. ally, Israel, for this war, a war that if the same issue would have happened, if the same October 7th would have happened here in the United States, if Mexico would have attacked, or Mexican militants would have attacked, or terrorists would have attacked Southern California, there would be no more Mexico. There would be no more Tijuana, wherever they came from, across the border. The U.S. and every Western democracy in the world would and should absolutely defend its people from active terrorists like Israel is doing against Hamas, despite what the world is saying. And when we have to really take a look at the ICC and their actions, because if they're doing this to Israel, who's not a member state, the United States is next. And Representative Brian Mass, who was on the podcast a few weeks ago, actually initiated a bill. He proposed new legislation that mirrors Trump's 2017 executive order almost exactly, aiming to impose similar sanctions on ICC officials if they proceed against actions against the U.S. or its allies. And the legislation underscores the ongoing U.S. concern about the ICC's reach and the potential impact on international diplomacy. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Just this week, the Biden administration came out almost unsurprisingly. They came out and said that they will not support any sanctions effort from Congress. Incredible. But it's a little bit more of Biden talking out of both sides of his mouth, because initially he said that he was against the ICC's actions. His spokesperson said it. Kirby said it. They all were saying it clearly. And just this week, they put out a statement saying, well, they're against what the ICC is doing. They don't want to sanction them. This is part of a pressure campaign that Biden and the administration is waging against Israel and the prime minister to end the war just for political benefits, because everybody knows that if there's a war going on in November, it won't be good for President Biden. But I don't think Biden gets out of this one. Israel's not going to stop its war. And these pressure tactics by Biden and the International Criminal Court are not going to work. Just wanted to note that the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, or Injustice, like we like to call them, which is an EU body, they issued an order this week. It's a different court. They issued an order this week that Israel should stop its attack on Rafah. Just so everybody knows, Rafah is the place where there's 4 more battalions, the last 4 battalions of Hamas. That's where they are, and that's where the over 120 hostages, including 4 Americans, are. So they're telling Israel, you got to stop. We can't go out and save your hostages. You have to live with terrorists at your doorstep who promise to attack you day in and day out. Luckily for the world, Israel's not going to listen to the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. Israel is going to continue. And also, luckily for the world, the ICJ has no jurisdiction. They have no enforceability. Yes, it's technically binding because it's part of the United Nations. I think I said earlier the EU. I meant the UN. They're part of the United Nations, but they have no enforcement mechanism at all, and it's just gonna stand there. We will see it probably at the UN Security Council before Biden's term is up and over, before we have President Trump, hopefully in January. And the real question is going to be: is the United States going to veto any action by the Security Council? Only time will tell. But ladies and gentlemen, guys, make sure you're paying attention to these things. It's important. It's not just what's happening around the world. The ICC is coming after Israel. They'll come after the United States again if they can as well. And we can't allow that to happen. We need to stand for truth. And even though everything seems to be backwards these days, everything seems to be upside down, people are standing for evil and for wrong. We have to stand for good things and continue to be optimistic and keep fighting the good fight. Thanks, everybody, and I'll see you next week.